Let's look at the GDP numbers that was released yesterday by the National Bureau of Statistics, which shows that the growth slowed to 1.94% in the second quarter compared to the 2.10% in the first quarter. And we had 8 sectors expanding, 3 contracting, and 8 slowing. Let's look at this critically with Paul Alaje, senior economist at SPM Professionals. Hello, Mr. Alaje. Thank you for joining us, and good morning.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Right, you saw the numbers released yesterday by the NBS. Should we really worry?
Yeah, I think we should be worried, not just because GDP is now 1.94% from the previous quarter, first quarter 2019, which was 2.10%, this 2.1%. The worry here should be that what emaciated or what contracted was non-oil sector. The oil sector grew, which is one of the reasons why we have the kind of growth we experienced at 1.9. If oil sector had remained the same, would have asked definitely something less. So oil sector grew by over 5%, but the non-oil sector had a lot of contrast. More sector contracted, and the sharpest level of contrast was in power, steam, and also electricity. We have some level of growth, but by and large, construction contracted, real estate contracted, power contracted, steam contracted. Many contrasts in non-oil sector, and this is where you have the jobs. Of course, the reverse is the case when it comes to revenue to government. 10% of GDP, arguably less than 10% in the real sense of GDP, which is oil sector, is responsible for approximately 90% of revenue. The 10% of the GDP does not account for up to 10% of jobs. The non-oil sector that accounts for most of the job is what witnessed a major contrast in the second quarter GDP report. So it's a lot of worry, not just because the GDP figures is growing lower than our population growth rate, which arguably could be between 2.7% to 3.1%, depending on which authority we want to accept or we want to follow. But what is certain is that the economy is contracting. Of course, we grew, but the rate of growth is lower.
All right. Now, the World Bank had in June cut its growth forecast for Nigeria to about 2.1% for 2019. That's from 2.2% earlier forecast. Now, they cited heightened tension and, of course, subdued investment. With this growth trend we have seen so far, is it in line with World Bank's forecasts?
Yeah, to mention 2% growth rate is to say that Nigeria is not going to grow, or Nigeria is going to have -1 deficit growth, because population growth rate is relatively steady at 3%. Now, are we even going to get to 2% growth rate as mentioned by World Bank and the sister organization IMF? My fear is that if you look at 2.1 and you add that to 1.94% and you find the average, we are around 2.1% or 2.0%, which World Bank has predicted that Nigeria will have. And I believe that we should do beyond that. We might be doing that based on this second quarter report. But when you look at quarter-on-quarter GDP growth rate, Nigeria seems to have the same cycle. And that is why it's very easy to predict Nigeria on 2%. The last quarter-on-quarter GDP growth rate was -13. What we have now is 2. Almost exactly the figure we had in 2016 quarter-on-quarter, 2017 quarter-on-quarter, and what we have in 2018 quarter-on-quarter. We have started the same pattern from first quarter 2019 with -13, and guess what we have now? Positive growth rate at above 2%, but when you check the next one, by the end of the year, you will also have -13. This is as predictable as anything, and the result for World Bank and IMF has been the same over the years, particularly in the last 4 years. This is reality we are faced with again. It's easy to talk about annual growth rate, but when you look at GDP growth rate, not on annual basis, but on quarterly basis, the result seems to be the same all the time. So there is need for us to worry. We might definitely not do beyond 2%, but with the indicators we are seeing coming out from National Bureau of Statistics, we might be having a bit lower than 2%. But we hope that third quarter report will be better than what we have right now, this moment today.
Right. Well, we have seen Nigeria still depending heavily on oil, despite the volatility on the commodities and the global markets. And, of course, we've seen the trade tensions and the issue of Brexit and the global recession fear. So is Nigeria likely to get into recession again?
Please, can you take that again?
Yeah, talking about what's happening globally with the fear of global recession, the trade tension, and the fact that Nigeria still depends on oil for its foreign exchange earnings. Are we likely to slip into recession again?
Yeah, we are susceptible to recession, particularly with what is going on around the world. But it depends on who wins the war, the trade war between China and America. China have decided to slam a bit of tariff on American oil. And if China is not buying, Chinese government is not buying so much of American fuel or have decided to slam the tariff, which countries or what country or which country will benefit from such now? However, if there is global economic quagmire as a result of Brexit, as a result of argument between Europe and Japan and America versus China, it will definitely affect total global output, which of course we have implication of what Nigeria sells the most to the world, which is crude oil in this instance. This would mean that if you don't build non-oil sector, which perhaps stays with us relatively more, Nigeria of course will be affected. The experience we had in 2007 and what we had in 2015, 2016 to a big part of 2017 might just repeat itself. But the best thing to do today is to look at what is responsible for non-oil sector major fall, which of course is power. It's key in that fall. It has the highest level of fall when you compare it. Of course, it grew, but the level of growth was from 8% to relatively 1 or 2% growth rate, compared with the entire growth we have. And that does not mean there are no positive growth or increase in the type of growth. Education, we had a positive growth higher than what we had before, and we had quite a number of subsector in non-oil sector that also witnessed some level of growth.
All right, Mr. Ledger, with the tepid GDP growth numbers we've seen, and of course declining inflation in July, what is the likelihood that interest rates will be cut by the MPC at its next meeting this month?
Well, I don't see MPC cut interest rates on the immediate. You will see that MPC most of the time have decided to sit on the fence because Nigeria economy is susceptible to response. Such decision may respond to high inflation rates, which of course the MPC will have to decide. Do you want to battle inflation, which is your core mandate, or you want the economy to grow, which of course is one of the mandates, but more to fiscal authority. Fiscal authority should take more responsibility for the kind of growth we have because of late budget passage. And even when budget is not passed, you still have recurrent expenditure, which of course cannot do much. It cannot affect construction. The first thing mentioned by National Bureau of Statistics regarding fall in second quarter was construction. Construction fell, followed by those who have constructed their land and they want to invest their fund in real estate within the economy. You had negative growth also in real estate. So late passage of budget is one of the reasons, because it's the single document that is responsible the most for in terms of fiscal policy. The budget is late. We are talking about 2020 budget. If we're going to pass the budget as mentioned by the Senate President last day of December, if they like, the budget must be presented this week to the National Assembly. Failure to do so will mean Nigeria may not achieve January to December that is mentioned by the current administration, particularly the leadership of Senate, if executive don't present to them, except if the needful, the assignment that should be done, the consideration on the budget will not take place. If you don't have it this week, today is Wednesday already. If you don't have it this week, I'm sorry, that may not be the case in December. All
right, thank you, Mr. Alaji. Let's hope that things turn out well. Thank you for your time. Paul Alaji is a senior economist at SPM Professionals.